Distinguished, can I have the sound, please? Thank you. Distinguished guests, my colleagues, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and good morning. I'm here today to, along with my colleagues, to present to you the Q4 results and the highlights of 2017. And with that, I think we'll just get right into the business so that we can get also to your plenty of time for your questions afterwards. And please keep your phones on. It's the sound of money, okay? 2017 was a remarkable year for the company. If we look at the quarter and the full year, if I look at the quarter first, there was very significant competition and and there are a lot of seasonality effects because of the cold. It was particularly cold. I'm Canadian, and I didn't expect that it would be this cold during the winter time here. With that in mind, it had an effect, but not a very large one. Revenue was 32.2 million BDT, up 8% year over year. EBITDA margin was a healthy 58.8%. The stable voice pricing, but there was competitive pressure on data as we expected. The earnings were impacted by certain one-off items, which the CFO will go through a little later on. For the year, our revenue was 128.4 billion BDT, and that's almost a 12% growth over 2016. EBITDA was 76.2 billion, and that's almost a 20% growth from 2016. The year-to-date market subscriber base at the end of last year was 65.3. That's about 7.4 million additional subscribers. The SIM market share stayed at about 45% as of December 2017. Subscriber revenue growth on voice was 9.5%, and that's a remarkable number in itself. Data revenue growth was at 46%, which is not unexpected at the beginning of the growth of a data market, although the number is quite high. The data subscriber addition was 6.6 million, and at the end, we had 31.2 million data subscribers in the market. And the dividend, as you can see, is 20 BDT 0.5 per share. So what are the key success factors for us? Well, if you start with a superior network experience, we added 1,776 3G sites, 1,010 2G sites were rolled out during the year. We have modernized the telco core, the VAS and digital services platform. Investments were made to modernize the core and value-added services platforms, and we actually are working to ensure a future-proofed core operation as we move into new technologies, inshallah, in the coming months. This modernization reduces future OpEx and CapEx requirements. The new virtualized telco core is now ready for service. It's both efficient and ready for the future, and we have spent a lot of time planning for this. We have done significant optimization of both the Facebook and the YouTube experience. Instead of measuring just the technical parameters, we actually measure the performance of our network from the consumer's point of view with probes in the network that say how fast does it take for Facebook to load, how long does it take for a YouTube video to load, how much buffering exists. That's the real experience from the customer's point of view. The rest, which are the parameters of the network, the call drops and so on, and all the other things that we need to deal with, are kind of inputs into this final experience. We have migrated our IT managed services from Accenture to Vipro. That was done seamlessly. The new IT vendor was adopted in 2017, and Vipro will have a significant effect on our efficiency, and all the engagement terms in terms of our expenses have been improved. I think one of the most important things that happened last year is the simplification of our product line. 40 or more products were retired or modified to make them simpler to use. For example, in ringback tones, the welcome tunes that you have on your phones from time to time, please buy, it's good. It's a lot easier to now. There were 36 price points with different kinds of expiry dates. So we've reduced that from 36 to 3. And in doing that, we were getting roughly 20,000 phone calls per day to the call center only on ringback tones. That in itself, in a very small product, essentially, made it very difficult for it to be actually profitable. We simplified the IVR by removing 25% of the steps. We digitized the top 20 customer-facing processes in the company, like how to purchase a new SIM, how to activate it, SIM replacement, ownership transfers, and so on. We made that all much simpler last year. And we took much more control over the third-party value-added service providers through a platform called DPDP. Daily complaints to our touch points reduced by 74%. In fact, the daily calls to the call centers are down by 64%, and at present are about 37,000 for a whole service per day. Remember, I said ringback tones itself was contributing 20,000 a day. We were well over 100,000 calls per day at the call center. All this contributes, because of a better customer experience, to lower costs, and in fact, greater adoption of our services. We have continued on efficient operations, the simplification of our IS and IT platforms through contract negotiations, portfolio simplification, and inventory reconciliation. In the network operations side, we have worked very hard on rent efficiency, energy efficiency, annual maintenance costs, and O&M cost efficiencies. In market spending, we've created a lot. Well, our market spending in advertising is much, much, much lower than it was 5 years ago. And in fact, in some media, like newspaper, we basically don't spend a lot of money at all anymore. Most of our spending is now skewing towards digital platforms, which are much more focused, much more targeted, more efficient, and less expensive. And we have done significant organizational restructuring, including reductions in headcounts, both in employees directly employed by us, but by people that we pay for indirectly through contracts across all different kinds of employment models. We have greatly strengthened our physical and digital distribution. MyGP, for example, which is the app that we are working on now to bring more customers to, we have about 2.1 million monthly active users, about 11 million downloads, and we have designed and implemented 37 different features in that in the last year. This digital form of acquiring, managing, buying our services, and managing your accounts is going to become more and more important. It's a practice well understood around the world and that we're bringing here. We also rolled out 1,325 GP Express stores in the quarter, and by year end, we look at that number was just under 7,000. These GP Express stores are very important for us in terms of the distribution of handsets and as a platform for future businesses and facilitating e-commerce platforms in the country. We opened 2 GP lounges, which are for customer experience and digital services. Maybe we can even hold one of these meetings in a GP lounge, maybe on the first quarter next year. Maruf, that just came out of my mouth. I'm not sure if we can do that, but let's try it. And we've moved very much ahead on digital platforms. For example, applications for our sales reps in the field to make their job more efficient, subscriber acquisition form management, inventory updates. And in terms of the screens that our customer service people use, they had 35 different screens that they had to use and learn about in order to serve a customer. Well, by simplifying the back end, now that's at 12, and it'll become even less as we go along. Within 3 or 5 presses of a key now, a sales executive can complete almost any transaction. Excuse me, I'm going to sort this out here because it's a little bit of it's unclipped. There we go. I think it's okay now. I just want to make sure I think it's okay. The clip came off. Is it okay now? Yeah, not in my nose. Thank you. Okay, that's much better. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. So three key things: healthy growth in Q4. There was very heavy rainfall during the quarter, especially in October, and the post-effect of the flood and the winter has been quite remarkable on all operators, not just us. We've seen a lot of aggression by our competition on data offers. We have been modest in our reaction as to not to follow them down and to keep the market healthy. We have instituted a number of different offers during the quarter that have helped us continue to grow, and our sub base, in fact, grew by 2.3% during that quarter, and our market share for the quarter stayed at the 45% as of November. The revenue growth has been quite important to maintain for us, and we were able to maintain pricing on revenue on voice during the quarter, even if it was a very tough quarter, in order for us to maintain competitive and to deliver the results that we had projected for ourselves. We had almost a 2% increase in the quarter-over-quarter daily revenue generating base. So we have the number of subscribers, and we count the number of subscribers that are there every week or every day, and the subscribers that are that come every month. But this daily growth and the growth in daily revenue generating base is very important for us. And on the data side, we added 1.2 million new data subscribers during the quarter. It was a 3.4% Q over Q in daily data users. The daily volume grew by 62%, and by 11% quarter over quarter. So 62% year over year and 11% quarter over quarter. On our CSR side, one of the things that we're particularly proud about is our working with teachers and BRAC and other organizations to teach children how to use internet safely. And during the year, through the quarter, in fact, but at the end, we finished this in the quarter, 52,000 students were met, and we taught them an interesting seminar on how to use internet safety, answered a lot of questions. I did one of them myself. It was quite fascinating to see how much they know and how much they want to know about using the internet safely. Children are quite sophisticated now when it comes to using the tools, and 400 of our employees participated in this, which is good for us. It's good for team building, and we had 20 BRAC trainers that did it as well. I've asked my CMO to be here today because I wanted to mention this piece. You know, we clinched 3 awards this year, and we don't have a lot of, we're kind of humble. We don't spend a lot of time pounding our own chest, but, you know, there are times where it's a good thing to say to people that the investments that we're making are recognized by our peers in our community. So we won the Best Overall Brand, Best Telecom Brand, and Most Consistent Brand at the Best Brand Awards in 2017. And I have to recognize it's a whole company award, but the leader of our commercial effort, Azman, thank you very much for this great job, and we look for more this year. Okay, the regulatory landscape. 4 items that I want to talk about here. The 4G operating license, spectrum auctions, and technology neutrality guidelines. In early July, there were roughly, there was a guideline that was produced in early July, which MNOs provided feedback on. There were 23 items which were, we had objections to. I think you've seen this in the press. We had 23 items that we had concerns about. And at this point today, all but 1 have been pretty much all resolved. These guidelines, I think, provide a fairly good framework for us to be able to proceed to the next step. But that's up to the different boards of directors of the different operators, and those decisions will be made as close to the auction time as possible, because we continue to work on some of the details of these arrangements that we're making. I think it's, we've had a pre-bid meeting, the process is working well, and then we will see how this goes on the 13th when the auction date, the scheduled auction date happens. but it has taken time. I have two observations here. It is critically important for Digital Bangladesh that 4G be deployed. I also believe that there is some room between the policy of Digital Bangladesh and the pricing of spectrum in the market. The pricing of spectrum in Bangladesh is actually quite high compared to its comparator group in Asia when you adjust for ARPU and you adjust for population. So we have made those observations. I'll make it here today, but in any case, the process, I believe, has gone well. The second thing is the BTRC audit. In 2015, the BTRC appointed a new auditor through a fresh appointment process to conduct an information system audit on Grameenphone from its inception to 2014. So this goes back to 1997. The audit was completed on the 6th of August, and part of the audit process, and by the way, a good audit process, as we believe, the draft audit was provided to us for comment. That's a general practice. We have given feedback on our positions. This time it's still between us and the auditor. And as of the 29th, there has been no feedback from the auditor yet. So we have not received a final audit report, neither has the BTRC, and we are looking forward and have set up a process whereby we can discuss the findings and find resolutions to the cases that can be resolved. We will continue to report to the market as we continue the discussions with the regulator, but at this point, it's just a draft audit report. The TowerCo company guidelines. This guideline has been approved by the ministry but has not been published by the regulator yet. And we believe that there's continued to be some discussions in the regulator. My view now is that we are not able to participate as MNOs in tower companies. And we, as part of the industry and the industry as a whole, will hold to our position that under our current licensing guidelines, we have the right to own, operate, build towers, and that we would resist and contest any move that would keep us to have this right, which has been acquired by foreign investors over a period of time. So this will be, we believe in tower companies. We believe tower companies should be in the market. We think they can be helpful. We should be allowed to create tower companies. We're the most experienced in managing them in this market. And we should not be compelled to either roll back or not build our own towers. So we're going to continue, but this is still a work in progress. Mobile number portability, which is the fourth item, that basically has been awarded in November. And at this point, we don't think it'll have a huge effect on the market. In prepaid markets, mobile number portability does not have a big impact, but we're in process of implementing MNP in the market, and I think that's going to be an exercise that'll happen before the second half of the year, so in the first half of the year. With that in mind, our priorities going forward, very simply, in 3 words, continue to grow. There's a lot of opportunity in this market to grow, both in data and in voice still. There's a lot of citizens of Bangladesh who don't even have access to a phone that should have access to a phone. So there's opportunity for network growth, opportunity for revenue growth on voice and in data, of course. Secondly, continuing to be efficient. This is really important. We have to become the best, least cost producer of minutes and megabytes. So you're going to continue to see us look at ways to optimize our networks, optimize our operations, so that we can offer the basic services that we offer as profitably, as effectively as possible, and with good quality. And finally, simplification. Interestingly enough, not always the most obvious story, but the simpler you make things, the easier it is for people to say yes and buy it and to use it. And it would seem that in our business for a long time, complexity was important. Let's multiply the price bands, let's make it complicated for people to know what they're spending. We have found quite to the contrary. The simpler you make it, the more people like you, our net promoter scores go up, our cost of serving customers go down, and customers come to us quite happily. It doesn't mean we don't have problems. It doesn't mean we don't have challenges. Doesn't mean we have to not work, for example, in Dhaka to continue to improve our network. But we've already taken steps in that area. And with the 4G network, with the spectrum neutrality, and with the new spectrum that we may or may not decide to acquire, I can't tell you that up front, that will help us continue to offer great service throughout the country. With this, I will pass it over to the Chief Financial Officer, who will go through his part of the presentation. Then we'll go to the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Michael, and Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. I think just before starting, I would just also reiterate a little bit. Tomorrow, Telenor Group will present its fourth quarter performance, and you will see the same themes or the same strategic focus throughout the group, growth, efficiency, and simplification, because this is the core of our digital transformation throughout the group. And if you follow Telenor, you see also that the analysts now start to recognize that digital transformation is not only about digitalizing the customer journey, but it's also to reduce cost. Moving to the numbers, Michael has already, you could say, given the highlights, but in Q4 we have an 8% revenue growth year over year, with a strong margin, 58.8% EBITDA margin, which is 4 percentage points higher than the same quarter last year. We have, for the last 4 quarters, we have a capex to sales of 11.3%. And as Michael showed, it's 776 new 3G sites. It's 1,010 new 2G sites. And we do have done a modernization of our core, and we have also modernized some of our platforms. And then we have an earnings per share of 4.42 taka, coming as a result of an 11.1% growth in net profit after tax, compared to the fourth quarter 2016. Moving to the next slide and our revenue development, as you see, yes, we grew 8% totally, mainly driven by voice, 1.8 billion. Data growth contributed with 1.3 billion. And then we have seen a decline in device revenue of 500 million, and also some decline in financial services, which is more of a reclassification. Voice revenues still growing steadily, 9.2% in Q4, quarter over quarter. And this is coming from, you could say, growth in the outgoing minutes of usage of 9.4%, and a 14.8% increase in the average subscriber base over the year. We sold less devices in Q4, so 500 million in values, but it went down, you could say, with approximately 50,000 devices in volumes. Devices is not our core business, so this is more like an enabler. So we are focusing more on, you could say, the growth that we have on service revenue and subscriber and traffic revenue. And the lower financial services was due to a one-off adjustment of 233 million Bcash SMS revenue that has been now reclassified from financial services revenues to value-added services. So you see here, it's the first quarter in a while where we don't have sequential growth quarter over quarter. And as Michael explained, this is seasonality, the winter impact. Q4 last year was more like an exception. But we have also seen that we have had more competition, especially on data. that has impacted also Q4. Moving to data, we have seen a 27% growth in the number of data users, with a healthy revenue growth of 29.1%, and a 62.2% growth in data volumes. So still, I would, compared to other markets, say that the level of monetization of data in Bangladesh and by Grameenphone is very healthy. It's high and healthy. We added 1.2 million new data subscribers to our base, and at the end of 2017 we had 31.1 million active data users out of the 65.3 million total base. And through the year we have added 6.6 million active data users. And as you see from the graph here, you see that data revenues are steadily contributing more and more to the overall service revenues. So now it's close to 18% of service revenue. And yes, I think Q4 was more tough when it came to the competition around data. We have had our offers out in the market, buy two, get one for free. We have had churn back campaigns, and been also quite active in competing with our two major competitors. Smartphones here is also increasing. We have now 28.6% of our customer base that have a smartphone, and this is up from 24% 1 year ago. And in the quarter we sold 92,000 smartphones. Moving to ARPU, we saw a drop in the service ARPU of 3.1% compared to Q4 last year. But we see a growth in the data ARPU of 1.6%. You could say the reason for the drop in the service ARPU is coming mainly from you could say voice and interconnect, but partly offset then by growth in data. If you look at the AMPU, average minutes per usage, we saw a drop in Q4 of 7.7%. But we saw actually the average price per minute on voice growing by 5%. So we don't really see that it's you could say the competition has changed in a negative direction when it comes to voice. The competition is focusing on data. If we look at 2017 for the full year, we have a growth in our service ARPU of 2.9%. Against the 3.7% growth in the service average price per minute. And we have a growth in the data ARPU for the full year of 15.2%. The average megabyte per user grew 33.5%. But due to the competition, we saw a decline in the average price per megabyte of 13.6%. EBITDA, we see EBITDA growing, of course coming from the higher top line, but a few words around OPEX, underlying OPEX. We have had some one-offs in the quarter, 46 million net, and we also had some one-offs in Q4 2016. So if we see the underlying OPEX in Q4, we saw an increase of 169 million, which is mainly driven by, you could say, the higher revenues. reload commissions, revenue share with the regulator. And of course also with the more sites, more than 1,000 new sites, we have more site rentals and power consumption. But this has been partly offset then by a lower sales and acquisition cost. We had 1.5 million lower gross adds in Q4 2017 compared to 2016. So in percentage, OPEX grew 1.6% in Q4 versus Q4 last year. And if we take for the full year, it's 5.6% growth year over year. OPEX will be, of course, just as important as the growth, as Michael mentioned. And you will see us becoming more and more efficient as a part of the digitalization. If you look at OPEX to sales, we have, this is a good KPI on efficiency improvements as well, 34.1% in the quarter versus 35.7% a year ago. And nominally, the EBITDA, if you see here, the growth in the EBITDA, the growth in the EBITDA, we have a growth of 2.6 billion, is coming from the higher revenues, 2.4 billion, and lower COGS of 0.5 billion, then partly offset by the higher OPEX. And then the Q4 EBITDA margin is 4 percentage points higher than it was a year ago. If we look at the normalized, if you look here, you have the reported EBITDA and a 19.5% growth year over year. If you normalize that, the normalized EBITDA growth year over year is 17.5%, and the normalized EBITDA margin is up 4.8 percentage points. So a very strong, not only revenue performance, but also a very strong EBITDA performance. It is an all-time high for Grameenphone. CapEx, we invested for the year, as you see here, 14.5 billion taka. We have already mentioned, you could say, the network rollout on 2G and 3G. We have a population coverage now on 2G, which is close to 99.5%. And on 3G, we have 92.55% population coverage. Basically now covering, yes, there are black spots here and there, but overall population coverage now on 2G is basically the Bangladeshi population, and on 3G is 92.55. We have had some one-time effects, as you know. We reported, you could say, an additional 1.14 billion in Q2. We have also had a reversal of 1.3 billion now in Q4. So the 14.5 billion represents, you could say, the organic capex investments done in the year of 2017. Moving to the earnings, earnings growth of 11% despite one-off items. If we normalize the net profit after tax, we have a growth of 32.6%. Of course, coming from the higher EBITDA, but partly offset by higher income tax of 700 million and higher depreciations of 300 million. And then during the quarter, we have had negative one-off adjustments of 2 billion taka. And you could say the biggest items of this include some, you could say, loss on contracts that we have had out-of-court settlements with vendors. We have done impairment of certain software. And you know the Accenture Bangladesh that Michael mentioned, the wind down cost related to the 49% ownership we have in or had in Accenture Bangladesh. There are also accelerated depreciations of core network elements. Operational cash flow, 14.3 billion. It's down from the previous quarter by 3.2 billion, mainly due to the higher capex. Recorded 4.7 billion in capex in Q4, and also half a billion lower EBITDA in Q4 compared to Q3. If you look on the right side here, you see our net debt to EBITDA. We hardly have any debt at all, and we have a higher cash balance of 7.4 billion, and we have reduced our debt with 3 billion taka. So very strong balance sheet, definitely. And then yesterday, our board of directors recommended a 100% final cash dividend for 2017, and also mentioned on the first slide Michael showed that would be a 20.5 taka per share as dividends for 2017. And you see the payout ratio continues to stay high, 101% of profit after tax. Record date or ex-dividend date will be 19th of February. And of course, this is subject to approval in the AGM that will be on the 19th of April. Then a few things which is coming now, and I would assume that some of you already knows this. As analysts, you know there are two new IFRS and BFRS standards now introduced from 2018. It's IFRS 9, which is financial instruments. So it's, you could say, it replaces IAS 39, but its financial instruments sets out requirements for recognizing and measuring financial assets, financial liabilities, and some contracts to buy or sell non-financial items. This will not have a significant impact on the financial statements for us. And we have also chosen to take sort of the advantage of adopting the simplified approach, which is possible under the revised standard. But IFRS 15 will be having more impact on us. It will have more impact in markets with high level of postpaid contracts than in a market like Bangladesh, with the overall majority being prepaid. IFRS 15, that's revenues from contracts with customers. So it creates a single model for revenue recognition from contracts with customers and replaces various other standards and interpretations. No significant impact in recognition of revenue for us, but customer acquisition cost, as we have, you could say, average lifetime of our customers exceeds 1 year. We will have an impact. You could say this year we have a deferment of 4.2 billion until end of 31st December 2017. and we will have an impact going into 2018 with retained earnings of 2.7 billion. So we will get back with more information when we are reporting the first quarter, giving you the comparison so that you can see the real impact on our first quarter with IFRS 15 and without, so that you see the real underlying, you could say, business performance. And then we have IFRS 16, which is coming from 2019. This is related to leases, capitalizing, you could say, operating leases. It will have a positive effect on EBITDA, because today operating leases are recognized as operating expenses, you could say, under current accounting policy. By capitalizing current operating leases, we take the net present value of the future payments and recognize that as interest-bearing liability, and then the repayments will be classified in financing activities in the cash flow statement, and is under current definition not part of free cash flow. This will impact also the reported CapEx, because as we are then capitalizing these operating leases, you will see a fluctuation in CapEx. But this is from 2019, and we will also be issuing, you could say, comparable numbers before and after introduction of this. For us as a telco, you could say the impacted areas are rentals of BTS sites, site sharing contracts, office rentals, and we could say fiber rentals. But this is a year, this is not this year, it's coming in 2019. I have my local accountant sitting here who is an expert on this. But if you have any questions around the new accounting standards, also just contact myself or Maruf, and we will try to answer as best as we can. And this is, you could say, both IFRS 9, 15, 16 impacts the entire Telenor group. So Telenor, when there is a change in an accounting standard, IFRS, Telenor issues what they call a Telenor accounting policy and have an interpretation of the new standard, which is then applicable for all the business units within the Telenor group. So it's not like we in Grameenphone have to do the interpretation ourselves. But there is also, of course, an element here that is important for the tax authorities and the regulator. So we also need to have an alignment locally here in Bangladesh. Then, just to summarize, 2017 full year, strong business performance in a competitive environment through excellent execution in the market. We have a stable SIM market share with good data customer acquisition. Voice revenue growth still close to 10% in 2017. Solid earning growth with high dividend payout. And for the fourth quarter, still healthy growth in a challenging quarter, given seasonality, the winter, but also higher competition that we have seen. And we have been investing more, as you have seen, in the fourth quarter than in any of the preceding quarters. So network rollout is continuing in order to maintain our number one position as having the best network in Bangladesh, which is a position that we will never ever give up. And then, of course, there were some impacts from the one-offs on the earnings in Q4. These are one-offs that takes down net profit after tax with 2 billion. Then I think we move to Q&A.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And again, we're quite happy with the year. I think we can take that and turn it off so I can stand in front of it. You can turn this one off. Okay. Okay, Q&A. Go ahead. Yep.
Well, I basically have two questions. The first one is what are Grameenphone's views on the ability of tower sharing companies to erode the company's network superiority?
No, well, they're not going to erode the network superiority. They're going to be there to provide additional services, maybe provide the ability for people to share more easily. They may be providing opportunity for some of the telcos to sell their towers and create cash for themselves, but they're not providing services to consumers. They're providing services to us. They also have a position where they, right now in the way the regulation is written, is that the tower companies, should there be any coming in, because it's not happened yet, would have a monopoly position in creating new towers. But we already have 13,000 sites already out there. Our need for new towers going forward is relatively limited, maybe another 1,000 or 2,000 over time. So the overall impact of the tower companies is not huge, except we don't want to have the right for us to build, operate, and manage our own towers removed. That's something that has been granted to us, perhaps under the Foreign Investors Protection Act or other things. I think we should be able to discuss this. But it's not a done deal yet. Second question?
The second question is how much are value-added services contributing to the overall revenue picture right now? And how many of those value-added services introduced over the last 2 years are going to be discontinued?
I think at this point of time, we are around 4%, and we think that the industry will transform towards more of digital services, and this will continue like this over the next 3-4 years. It will not probably substantially increase.
Yeah.
I think that's an industry trend. As more and more people get smartphones, you see that they are turning to more services through apps than the traditional value-added services on feature phones.
Yeah. It's not a growing piece of the business. Eventually it'll be a long tail, but it'll go away.
Just one last point to add on, that our agenda on the value-added services to make sure that customers gets the right experience, not a wrong activation of any service. And for that, if its growth is slower, we are okay with that.
Yep. Yes, sir.
I'm Razi from IDC Asset Management.
Yep.
So I have just two quick questions. One is, how much time do you have in mind to roll out 4G over the country?
Yep.
And what will be the mode of financing? Is it local debt or this? Have you decided already?
We haven't completely decided, but there is a rollout guideline, so that will be the minimum that we will do. But we're not going to tell you what the maximum we can do, because that's a competitive story, right? But so we'll meet the minimum. There is a fairly aggressive timeline in the guidelines. You can start with that, but we may do more than that. That'll be kind of our competitive thing. In terms of the financing, do you want to comment on that?
I think we have all the possibilities. You saw that we have hardly any debt in our balance sheet, and net debt to EBITDA is close to zero. So we can easily get local funding, fund from our own cash balance in a combination with local funding.
Yeah, one of the things that's different from 3G to 4G is that the ability for the operator to seek local funding is now open. Previously, you had to bring all the money in from the outside or fund from your own service. So we'll be able to borrow locally should we need. We already have existing facilities, and should we decide to do it locally, it's within the facilities that currently exist.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yes,
What percentage of your subscribers are smartphone users?
you know that number.
It is like 26.3% at this point of time.
And interestingly enough, there is a larger number of 4G users in this market in percentage today than any other market that we've launched before. So 4G will be important for us.
So these smartphones are 4G and above.
Some of them are, not all of them.
Not all of them.
Out of this 26, around 10% plus already 4G devices, which is very high compared to any other market where the 4G has been launched at the time.
Yeah.
I think just as a correction, I think we had 28.6% at the end of the fourth quarter, so we see this growing very fast. And I think the experience that we have as being part of Telenor, once you have 4G in the market, then you will see an inflow of 4G devices, because then it becomes relevant for the customers.
We were just talking before that in Dhaka, between 16 and 18% of the handsets are 4G enabled. So as soon as we launch 4G, should that come through as we think it is, those people will move to the 4G spectrum, and it will offload the 3G service as well. So that's, this is all kind of a story that we have to manage. And I'll come back to that a little later. Another questions? Next question. Come on, there got to be more than 4 questions today. Really? Yes, okay, go. And then Madam. Yep.
This is Wasim from Mozambique. The question is there any further development on the MFS license?
MFS license? No. At this point, nothing new to announce on MFS license.
So then, what benefits will come along technology neutrality?
That's a very good question, and thank you for that. It is unusual that you have spectrum that's reserved for 2G, 3G, and 4G. That is not the usual work. You should be able to move spectrum around and reallocate it in order to provide better services in different regions. And in fact, that used to be a very difficult job to reallocate the spectrum. It used to take months to do. There is now software available in some markets where this spectrum is reallocated every 15 minutes based on the demand in the market. There's more 4G users here, more 3G users there, but you have to have the ability to move the spectrum around. So number one will be better spectral efficiency, less capex cost in spectrum. Number two, the corollary, and more importantly, is a better service for customers.
I think if I just might add also, being a Norwegian.
No, really?
Norway, we are not that many people living up north there, but geographically it's quite big. And we cover 98% of the population with 4G. That wouldn't have been possible if we couldn't use low frequency spectrum in the more rural areas. So to have the combination of high frequency, low frequency, then you can provide, you could say, commercially 4G services to basically the entire population.
And neutrality is important for that.
So
Yeah.
the operator is offering 2 rates for, for full conversion there is 1 rate, and for the partial conversion there is another rate. So what do you think that which will be the most beneficial one?
That's a good question. It depends. The calculation is pretty simple. It's just simple math. What we need to convert today to meet our needs in the next year or 2, and what that's going to cost at $7.5 million per megahertz, and then what it would cost to convert what we have, the 22 megahertz. Time value of money. Is it worth doing it all now? Is it worth doing it all later? What's the extra cost in doing it all now, and can you afford it? That math we're doing, we'll keep it to ourselves for now. But yes, it's kind of a really simple business case to develop, and then we make the decision that we need to make based on that. Okay, you go. And then I'll go to this side. I'll look over here now. Sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm from Citigroup. It's good to see you like business at for a change.
There's a change. You know what happened? Right after this, we're all changing into Punjabi. Where's one of my guys? Stand because we have our pic. There you are. Look back. Just almost all like him, so that we can take our pictures for the annual report. So it's an aberration. I normally am in Punjabi. Go on.
Okay, can I get some clarity on what exactly went wrong with the one-off charges?
Yeah, the one-off charges, as I mentioned, we went into, you could say, an out-of-court settlement with some vendors. We did an impairment of some software applications, and we had the wind down of the Accenture Bangladesh. And then there were also some accelerated depreciations related to the network modernization that we mentioned in the beginning.
Accenture impairment was done last year, right?
There was an impairment done at Accenture, but this is the wind down costs.
This is the wind down cost, and for us then, being a 49% shareholder, we had to take, you could say, the full impairment in Q4.
Yeah.
What about the one-off FX loss of around 1.1 billion?
That's the exposure to the IFC loan.
Yes.
So, on one hand, you were expanding your network capacity. I understand that around 400 to 500 BTS is being rolled out every quarter.
Something like that, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and you also say that you are working on optimizing the rental cost.
Yes.
Fuel consumption cost. So, what exactly is going on there?
That's, well, first of all, the fuel consumption cost is very simple. The more efficient the batteries that you put in, the more efficient the equipment you put in, the lower the energy cost is. Also adding in alternate energy sources in some cases like solar, and in some of our markets we're actually using wind-mounted turbine, tower-mounted turbines for wind. We don't do that here yet. So that lowers the energy OpEx cost. The second thing is sharing. And the third thing is maybe in even some cases using only batteries and mains electricity, which is the norm in most parts of the world. So we're trying to lower that OpEx piece as well. On the rental side, sharing with other parties, and finding the right balance between creating revenue for ourselves on renting out our sites and lowering costs for ourselves by not paying as much on other people's sites. So this is a discussion that we have across the industry to decide, should we lower the costs, where the balance should be on the rental costs for ourselves. So it is an important piece going forward. We have around 3,000, almost 4,000 sites that are shared now. Either we are tenant or we are the landlord. So that becomes an important part of how we continue to reduce our OpEx. Just as an aside, I wanted to make this point and I didn't do it. We are actively managing our cost week by week, almost day by day. And when we said, for example, that the gross adds in Q4 were over $1 million subscribers less than last year, that wasn't a mistake. We didn't want to push the market, heat the market. We didn't need the subscribers, and we wanted the OpEx savings. So by twisting my officer's arm behind his back and saying, slow down a bit, no, he was actually quite volunteering for this. He had an OpEx target. We lowered our expectations in the fourth quarter a little bit because we wanted to meet the targets for our shareholders. I wanted to make that point. Okay.
And on this one, that every customer we enter, that we want a quality customer. So it's not that just a SIM activation. In that way, we can manage the revenue.
So we're not out there. You might see, we won't name others, out there handing out SIMs for free. We are not going to do that game. Okay? We don't do that. You had a question? I think you first and then you. Okay.
So, the concept of a new tower sharing company, so we are not clear about it. So, say Grameenphone had to spend $1.23 billion to build a BTS network, right?
Right.
So, if there is a new tower sharing company, all the other operators who don't have a similar sort of BTS network, if they can get access to those towers without spending much, without taking a hit on balance sheet, how do Grameenphone maintain its network superiority?
Well, it's a fair. We already have more towers than everybody else. So I think having a tower company out there is an option for us to use, as long as the rates are okay. And the rates on tower companies right now are quite high. And the business case for a tower company is go build it and have more than one tenant on it. So the business cases are difficult. So the best way for tower companies to exist is for the local operators to create a tower company and to create consolidation. You're not going to be able to come into this market with 3 operators and 30,000 towers and build 10,000 new towers and sell a virgin network to people. You're going to have to acquire towers, which is what EDOTCO is trying to do right now, or you have to be able to partner with somebody in the marketplace. We don't see it as a big problem. We only have another 1,500 to 2,000 towers, and we'd probably be fully covered. And the rest will be rooftops, in-building solutions, nano sites, and that kind of stuff.
The guideline probably says the operators will not be able to have their own tower. If that's the case,
No, it doesn't say that. It says you can't have your own tower company. You don't have to sell your towers. You don't have to sell your towers. No. There was this question here.
I am Shahbaz from Press Capital Limited. My question is regarding GPay. Actually, now it is
For the overall group? GPay, oh, GPay.
Oh, GPay, it's at very, very minimal level at this point of time, you know. It is like, there are a substantial amount of customers going to the retailer and paying bills, but the app side, we are now basically fixing all the customer journeys and experience. This is not a significant number to basically talk about as a revenue contribution.
Yep.
I think, no, in Bangladesh, all this digital payment thing is like now gradually increasing, you know. So once we are fixing all these customer journeys, we will go and basically make it even bigger for the customers, because obviously it brings a lot of convenience for the customers.
Okay, one more on this side, then I'll go over there. Go ahead, and there.
I'm Rafi from Hong Kong Asset Management. So there has been a talk from the telecom minister to reduce data prices. So
Yeah, we're looking for him to take. We're looking forward to him reducing and eliminating VAT on data.
what do you think the current price that Grameenphone is charging for its data, is it high?
No, our pricing in Bangladesh overall is the second lowest in the world. That's not our number, that's a GSMA number, and our taxes are the second highest in the world. So the scope for reducing pricing has to do with taxation. So he has, if you read the article that he put out, and it says reduce prices, he also talks in the article about is there a scope for reducing VAT on data pricing. And I think that's a progressive move for digital Bangladesh. Because what we are doing right now is charging a lot for handsets, a lot of taxes on handsets, a lot of taxes on customer services. I will not plead in this forum for lower taxes for GP. You saw the numbers, we should be paying our fair share of taxes. And as I've often said, my dad said to me one day, Michael, I hope you pay a lot of taxes because it means you're successful and honest. And by every measure, we're the highest taxpayer in the country. But on consumers, if they took a move to reduce costs to consumers by removing VAT on data, you would see a change in this country like you've never seen before over the next 5 years. And we would probably be more profitable and we would pay more tax. Because 50% of what we pay, 50% of the top line in some way ends up in the hands of the exchequer. The Honorable the Minister, happy birthday.
And you also have to take into consideration the spectrum prices, because the prices that we have been presented with for 4G are among the highest in Asia.
Yeah. You're going to question, and I'm going to go this way. This you? Was you? Okay, go. Yeah. This is the IFC loan that you're referring to? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And given the current situation as 4G is rolling out, what will be your capital budgeting plan going forward?
No, as we said earlier, we have many options. We can fund this by our own cash balance and existing credit facilities that we have. There is no requirement for foreign funding in the 4G guidelines. The IFC loan, we have 2 down payments in 2018, and we have all the flexibility, and yeah, that's it.
I mean, the math is simple. If it's better for us to borrow here and pay off the loan, we might do that. But it's also good to have a good international partner and to have some. The question is the exposure to the currency risk, which you brought up earlier. But we know this company has negative gearing. We have more cash than we have debt, so we have a lot of flexibility. You're going to ask a question?
Okay. So,
Oh, sorry, he had a follow up.
GP is also expected to maintain good cash dividend, right?
Yeah.
In coming days. So, given this maintaining cash dividend, will it be possible to finance the upcoming 4G and?
Absolutely. We have zero gearing. If for some reason we have to borrow, we borrow. The profit is there. It's just a question of what we're using the cash for.
Then it will be a local finance.
One of the biggest successes that we were able to get in the negotiations with the BTRC, because the banks were telling us this too, is they need access to good borrowers in the country. The phone companies are good borrowers. We were barred from doing that. The other two players, because they're 100% foreign owned, had to get 100% of their capital from outside. We had to get 65% of our capital from outside because we're 30 or 40% owned locally. That change was good for the banks, and we encouraged it. So I think that's important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Robin already said started about 40 cents, like conversion to 40 cents. So how has the early response been? That's the first part of the question. The second one is like there's a massive customer base for Grameenphone, hugely massive. So what is the conversion strategy from SIMs to 4G?
Part of this we can answer, part of this we won't, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think we already, all the SIM replacement happening are 4G SIM already. So there is, whether a customer is having a device or not, that's there. And then those are having into the 4G devices, we are basically one-to-one, we are contacting them and also giving different type of offers to basically to migrate to.
So, and we know where we're launching. We know which sites exactly are going to be the first sites, and so we're going to focus our efforts there. If you ask me where those sites are, I won't tell you.
Just a follow-up question, like, is it going to cost customers? Because like I can already see it in my head, competitors handing out free 4G SIMs with packed data.
Could be, but we're not going to talk about our commercial plans before we talk to our customers first.
And this is the 11th time a Telenor business unit is launching 4G.
So it's not our first rodeo.
So could you please give some more clarity on the ethics clause? You know that BDT depreciated around 5% last year in 2017, and GB had to take a loss like 1.1 billion till September
Yeah.
2017. And how do you see that going forward in this particular year?
Two,
We are expecting that.
it's a declining balance, so the exposure is smaller. And, you know, our CFO and the team will make a decision at one point if it's better to convert that loan into BDT or not. But in the meantime, it is what it is. We're not going to make any predictions on the devaluation or appreciation of the Bangladeshi taka. That's up to the Minister of Finance.
And we have, you could say, we are in a close dialogue with Telenor Group Treasury. We have experts sitting at Fornebu in Oslo. So we get good advice from the best experts on, you could say, how to protect ourselves from currency fluctuations and how to balance also within the group the currency exposure.
And another question is relating to the NBN LTU reliability issues. And Bangladesh Security Exchange Commission actually questioned you to whether you have kept any provision or not. So could you please give some highlights on this?
I'll give a quick answer and you can supplement. In all cases, there's an assessment made of all the cases, and we make a judgment whether this should be based on IFRS and BFRS, if this should be an accrual or if this should be a contingent liability. There's not much change on those cases over the last year. That is reviewed by our auditors and signed off by our auditors and our AGM. And again, back to the point that we made about our ability to raise funds should we have to pay something. If we had to pay something, we would be able easily to raise the funds here and pay it. And we have committed to the Bangladesh Bank, the FBR, to the Bangladesh Security Exchange Commission at their request that we are completely capable and willing and will acquit any final judgment or negotiated settlement immediately. So it's not an issue for us. We do this according to IFRS and BFRS, and that's the end of that story. And if there's something else that needs to happen, if so, there's an evolution, the first people to know will be the market.
If our legal position changes, then we have to do another assessment. So that's just how it is. And our assessment and the legal assessments that we do, we discuss with our external auditors, and we make the necessary provisions based on, you could say, each case and the probability that we will, you could say, that there is a probability that we have, you could say, a legal or obstructive obligation and a likely outflow of funds.
So we do it properly. Yep, next question. There was a question over here and over here. We'll answer everybody's question as best we can.
Hi, I'm Tariq Ibrahim from UCB Capital Management. So I was trying to understand your 4G rollout plan in detail. So if I understand it properly, you said that the rollout cost can be phase by phase, and the auctioning is it you have to pay upfront the auction, the spectrum auction cost, or also phase by phase?
Well, first of all, the rollout is over a period of time. It doesn't happen instantaneously. The base of that is the rollout guidelines that we have in the government. The payment for the spectrum that we may or may not buy, I'm not going to give any clues here because that's something that happens on the 13th, is we pay 60% up front, and then it's 4 payments of 10% over the year.
By the government.
That's correct. On spectrum neutrality, should we decide to buy some neutrality, that's all paid up front. The license itself is $1 million. That's paid up front.
So I think the BTRC already set out a base price. Based on that, what could be the approximate price based on the base price of the spectrum?
We're not even going to go close to that discussion. We're not allowed to do that. Yep.
Then there was a discussion about the date requirement.
The what?
The date requirement for the spectrum or the 4G rollout. But if I have seen it, according to your last annual declaration, the cash flow per share is 43 taka, and you're paying out roughly 21 taka. So you are supposed to have roughly 30 billion taka in your balance sheet, as you have negative net working capital. Am I right?
Oh, ask him.
The cash flow per share, it's stated that 42.79 approximately.
Well, I'm not sure how detailed we go into these discussions, but you could say our equity position is very high. And then we have the dividend payment after the ADM. Still, we have a solid equity portion, and again, funding what our board approves, or what we are going to do with the 4G auction. We have all the possibilities to fund it. But
considering that you have the cash in the balance sheet, that you are likely to use the cash first, right? I mean after paying all the retained earnings as dividend. That's a likely scenario, right?
it depends on, you can say so many things. We can pay everything from available cash, maybe.
Are you allowed to pay the cash in excessive of retained earnings? I mean, if you have zero retained earnings, can you
pay dividends without
dividends? The dividend payments will be restricted by, you could say, the current earnings and the retained earnings. And retained earnings, we have paid more than 100% earlier.
We have a retained earnings balance brought forward from last year. So we haven't completely exhausted retained earnings. And then, of course, what we're paying this year is what was brought forward, what we've already paid, and what we're going to pay.
The thing I'm trying to understand is that your total dividend declaration is 205%, right?
Of paid up capital.
Yes.
For the final one, it's 100. I mean, we already paid.
Yeah, including the interim. Yeah, right.
It's 101. Are you
Retained earnings. 101 of retained earnings,
Yeah.
205 paid up capital.
No. I'm thinking that.
Can we? Let's take it offline then.
I think we can take that offline. It's more technical.
More technical. Sorry, but we'll take it offline. Go ahead.
I was saying from Shelter Brokerage, you're currently doing on the free service, free replacement of the 4G SIMs, right? So
No.
You have to pay the replacement.
I've made no comment about how we're going to do the replacement of 4G SIMs. What I've said is that we will be replacing 4G SIMs. It might be paid, might not be paid. That's a commercial offer, and we're not going to discuss commercial offers before we make the offer. Yeah.
He was asking the SIM tax, whether applicable.
SIM tax. Oh, the SIM tax is there. The SIM tax is going to be there.
So that will be exempted or
No.
paying for that for behalf of the customer or like what?
We need to pay to.
We need to pay to the government the SIM
You have
tax.
to pay the government, but the SIM replacement tax that is came from the customer or?
This is a commercial offer. I'm not going to discuss the commercial
We have
offer.
to launch that, so.
Okay.
All SIMs that we sell today are U-SIMs. They're sold in the normal way as we have sold SIMs earlier.
Yeah, we have already seen that Robi and Airtel, they have asked to pay the SIM replacement tax because they have so far replaces the SIM for the 4G. There is an amount.
Actually, we are also asking all the SIM now replacement happening in the market, irrespective of 3G or 4G devices, we are actually providing 4G SIM, and customer is paying for that.
Yeah.
That's open market, everyone doing, Robi, Bangladesh.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief, is Bioscope won any award in this mobile video content category?
It's been nominated for a global award at the GSMA in February for that, yes. It's nominated, not won yet.
Alright, so what's your plan with Bioscope going forward? And another question is, how Bioscope is superior to Robi's iFlix?
Okay, I think we all should be proud of that this is a product, Bioscope, is built in Bangladesh. So, and with an extremely good customer experience, without any complaints, more than 2 million monthly active users. So that's what is the pride we have. I think we are now testing a couple of pricing strategy because this is a product and go beyond the boundary. So we are now trying all the iterations happening, the product development, ultimate product development activities are happening. We'll probably see in Q2 as a commercial launch. That's a possibility.
I think just to comment also on the iFlix, I don't think it's a fully relevant comparison because iFlix is not a Bangladeshi, you could say, streaming channel. You find it in many countries with different kind of content. Bioscope, that's Bangladeshi with Bengali content.
And we have an ambition, as you said, to serve more than Bangladesh with Bioscope for the Bengali community globally.
There are 300 million Bangladesh speaking people in Bangladesh, globally. So that's the uniqueness of Bioscope.
It's a market, we could go after that. Okay, we still have time. Go ahead.
So after the 4G auction is done, so what sort of growth do you expect in data revenue in 2019 relative to?
Forward-looking statement. Thank you. We expect growth. We, like I said, there's still growth, a lot of growth in data, I didn't mean to flip it, a lot of growth, still growth in voice. But as you know, I can't give you expected EPS. I can't give you any of that. So I can't tell you what the...
Is it going to be a significant increase?
Yes, I think there's going to continue to be significant growth in data. We're at the very beginning of the journey here. 4G was launched 10 years ago or 12 years ago in some markets. We're at the very beginning of the journey here. So 4G, which is the real data experience, the real native data experience for mobile, will fundamentally change a lot of things. E-commerce, entertainment, telemedicine, education. That changes. 3G is cool, is great, fantastic, it's done well, but this fundamentally changes things. So there is a lot of growth left.
I think you just have to look at the other markets when they have introduced 4G and look at the development. Then you will see the same thing will happen here in Bangladesh.
Okay. Are there any additional questions? Yes, we got one more.
In the BTRC audit, is there anything that keep investors worried? Because the companies give any feedback.
Well, we're still struggling and exchanging processes on how we handle VAT. VAT is a problem for us because, first of all, spectrum is a raw material. It shouldn't have VAT on it. It's not value added. That's number one. Number two, if you're going to charge VAT, we should be able to get a VAT receipt, a chalan. And the BTRC is not registered for VAT, but they still insist on calling it VAT. So it is a bit of a challenge for us. Something we've lived with in 2G and 3G. There may be some form of resolution, but this is in court 6 ways. So it's going to take a little bit of time to resolve. So it does cause us a concern, but it's not a block, or it may not, I shouldn't say that. It's still causing us concern, and we're going to continue to fight it till the last minute. Any further questions? Okay, we'll take one more and that's it. Okay, go ahead.
You have said there is a $2 billion worth of negative adjustment. You said there is a majority came from the vendor-related adjustment, and as far as you know that in previous quarter we have also seen this kind of adjustment for the vendor-related and the device-related adjustment. So how far this is gonna be in the upcoming quarters? Is it done for as of today, or there will be another round for?
No, I have to be careful because I'm used to giving forward-looking statements.
You're not in Malaysia
But I'm
anymore.
not in Malaysia anymore, so I cannot answer that question fully. But what we have seen earlier, I think you are referring to the voluntarily separation schemes that we have had in the company. And then there will always be some one-off adjustments. And I think at this year end, they were bigger than usual. There are no guarantees, of course, that there will not be in 2018, but I think Q4 2017 stands out a little bit special in that sense.
Okay. I want to thank you all. If there's any individual questions, there's a high-quality sandwich and a piece of cake back there, and we can take a minute to talk if there's something else you want to add. Thank you so very much for your attention and coming in. We're very grateful for your support and your coverage. Thank you.
Thank you.